She was making tea when my phone buzzed. I remember that detail clearly, the particular sound of the kettle, the way the afternoon light came through the kitchen window, at that angle it only hits in late October, flat and pale the way it gets in Ontario before the first real snow. My wife of 22 years was standing at the counter in her housecoat, and I was sitting at the table going through some papers, and everything about that moment felt like a Tuesday, which it was. The text was from my younger brother. My brother retired 2 years ago from a career in commercial aviation, 31 years flying routes across North America, mostly domestic, sometimes down to the Caribbean. He knows airports the way other men know their own backyards, every terminal, every gate configuration, every lounge. When he texts me out of nowhere on a Tuesday afternoon, it is usually about hockey or to complain about his knee. It is not usually what I read that day. "Are you home right now?" I typed back that I was. He called immediately. "Is Margaret there with you?" he asked. His voice had something in it I hadn't heard before. Not alarm exactly, more like the careful flatness a person uses when they are trying not to alarm someone else. I looked up. My wife was pouring hot water into her mug, her back to me, the steam rising around her. "She's right here," I said. "Why?" There was a pause on his end that lasted perhaps 3 seconds. In 30 years of knowing my brother, I had never heard him pause like that before answering a question. "That's not possible," he said quietly, "because I'm watching a woman who looks exactly like Margaret walk through gate 34 at Pearson right now, and she's holding hands with a man I've never seen before in my life." I did not say anything. "Bernard," he said, "are you there?" I was 63 years old, sitting at my kitchen table on a Tuesday in October, and the world had just tilted 2 degrees in a direction I did not have a name for. "I'm here," I said. "My name is Bernard Okafor. I spent 34 years as a forensic accountant, most of it with a firm in Toronto, the last 11 as an independent consultant. My entire career was built on one skill, finding the thing that does not match. A number out of place, a date that doesn't align, a pattern that looks normal until you look at it from a slightly different angle and suddenly you cannot unsee the problem. I tell you this not to boast. I tell you this because it is the central irony of everything that followed that a man who spent 3 decades finding what was hidden in other people's financial lives failed, for longer than I would like to admit, to see what was hidden inside his own home. Margaret and I met in 1994 at a conference in Ottawa. She was working in pharmaceutical sales at the time, smart and composed and funny in a way that crept up on you. We married in 1997, bought a house in Mississauga, raised 2 children who are now grown and living their own lives in Vancouver and Halifax, respectively. 22 years of what I understood to be a solid, if not spectacular, marriage. The kind of marriage that stops being a question you ask yourself and simply becomes the ground you stand on. She had, over the past several years, been doing some consulting work of her own. Healthcare sector. She traveled occasionally a few days here, a long weekend there. I never thought much of it. My own career had required travel. It seemed reasonable. Standing in my kitchen that afternoon, I tried to hold 2 things at once. The woman pouring tea at my counter, and whatever my brother was watching at Pearson International Airport. "Send me a photo," I said. "I'm trying," he said, crowded. "I don't want to be obvious. Don't approach her," I said. I didn't know why I said it. Some instinct. "Bernard, it looks exactly like her. Same hair, same way she stands. She's wearing that green coat Margaret has." Margaret owns a green coat. It is a dark forest green, wool, bought at a shop on Queen Street, West 3 winters ago. I had been with her when she bought it. I looked at my wife's back. She was doing something with her phone now, still standing at the counter. I said, "I'll call you back," and hung up. I sat there for what felt like a long time, but was probably 45 seconds. Then I folded my papers very carefully, the way you do when you need your hands to do something ordinary. "Anything interesting?" I asked. She turned and gave me the same smile she had given me 10,000 times. "Just a message from the pharmacy. My prescription is ready." "Which one?" I asked. She named a medication I knew she took. I nodded. She carried her tea to the living room and turned on the television. I sat at the table and thought about the green coat. My brother sent the photo 12 minutes later. It was taken from a distance, slightly blurred, the way a photo taken quickly without drawing attention often is. A woman in a green coat, dark hair, facing away. Beside her, a man tall, in a charcoal blazer, a rolling suitcase. Her hand was through his arm. It could have been Margaret. The height was right. The hair was right. The coat, if that was what I thought it was right. I went upstairs on the pretense of looking for something in my office. I opened the hall closet where coats are kept. The green coat was not there. I checked the bedroom closet. I checked the hooks by the back door. I went through every place in the house where a coat might reasonably be and a number of places where it would not. It was gone. I came downstairs. Margaret was watching a home renovation program. She had her feet tucked under her on the couch, the way she always did. She looked entirely at ease. "Have you seen your green coat?" I asked from the doorway. She looked up. Something crossed her face quick, nearly imperceptible, the kind of micro-expression that most people would not catch. I caught it. I have made my living catching things people did not intend to show. "I dropped it at the dry cleaner last week," she said. "It needed cleaning before winter." "Which cleaner?" She named the place on Ontario we had used for years. "Right," I said. "Of course." I went back to my office, closed the door, and called the dry cleaner. They had no record of the coat. I want to be precise about what I felt in that moment, because I think precision matters here. It was not rage. It was not heartbreak. It was something closer to the feeling I get when I am deep into a set of financial records, and I find the first number that does not fit a cold, focused clarity. The part of my brain that has been trained for 34 years to follow a discrepancy wherever it leads had just found a discrepancy, and it had found it inside my own life. I called my brother back. "She's at the gate," he said. "Flight to Vancouver. Boards in 20 minutes. "Vancouver. Our daughter lives in Vancouver." "Has she seen you?" I asked. "No. I'm staying well back. Bernard, I'm telling you, if I didn't know it was impossible, I would bet my pension on this being Margaret." "Stay back," I said again. "Let them board. Don't engage." I hung up and sat very still for a long time. The woman downstairs had made tea, had smiled at me, had told me about a prescription and a dry cleaner. She had done all of this without hesitation, without a single crack in the performance. And it was a performance I understood that now with the same certainty I understand a fraudulent balance sheet when I see one. The question was not whether something was wrong. The question was, how deep did it go, and how long had it been going on? I went back downstairs. I said I was going out to pick up a few things. She said fine, told me to get more coffee if I was passing anywhere that sold it. Normal, domestic, undisturbed. I sat in my car in the driveway for a moment, and did something I should tell you I'm not particularly proud of, though I will not apologize for it either. I opened the tracking app on my phone. 2 years ago, Margaret and I had set up a shared location feature. Her idea, actually, she'd read something about emergency response times and wanted us both to be findable if something happened. We'd set it up one evening after dinner, and I had never thought about it again. Her location showed her inside our house, which meant either the app was wrong or her phone was inside the house. And this was the third option. The phone showing our house was not the phone she was actually carrying. I went back inside. I told her I'd forgotten my wallet. She was still on the couch. I went to the kitchen, and on the counter, beside the kettle, sat her phone. An older model, one I recognized. I picked it up. No passcode on this one. She'd complained about passcodes on older phones. I checked her location settings. The sharing feature was active and broadcasting from the kitchen counter. Her real phone, whatever phone she was actually carrying, was somewhere else entirely. I put the decoy phone back exactly where I found it. I got my wallet. I left. I drove to a coffee shop on Dundas, and I sat there for 2 hours, and I thought, here is what I knew. A woman who appeared to be my wife had boarded a flight to Vancouver. The woman in my house claimed to be my wife, but was maintaining a false location through a secondary device. The green coat, a very specific and recognizable item, was not at the dry cleaner, but appeared to be at Pearson International Airport. Here is what I did not yet know. Who the woman in my house actually was, what the arrangement was, how long it had been happening, and what precisely the purpose was. I am a forensic accountant. Purpose, in my experience, nearly always comes back to money. That evening I went through our joint accounts with the kind of attention I reserve for professional audits. I had not looked closely at our finances in a long time. Margaret handled most of the day-to-day banking, which I had always considered a reasonable division of household responsibility. I saw now what that delegation had actually cost me. Over a period of approximately 19 months, there had been a consistent pattern of transfers. Small amounts, nothing individually that would trigger any flag. 200 here, 350 there, occasionally 8 or 900. The kind of numbers that look like groceries, car expenses, household incidentals. But they were going to an account I did not recognize, at a frequency and rhythm that, when you laid them out on a timeline, was not random at all. It was deliberate, careful. The work of someone who understood how financial monitoring worked and was specifically designing around it. The total, across 19 months, was a little over $62,000. I closed my laptop and sat in the dark for a while. In the morning, the woman in my house made breakfast. Eggs and toast, which was Margaret's standard Tuesday breakfast, even though this was now Wednesday, and I noted that she'd maintained the correct routine. She asked if I'd slept well. I said I had. She told me she was thinking of going to see her sister in Hamilton for the weekend. I said that sounded nice. After she left the kitchen, I went to the hall bathroom, the one off the main hallway that Margaret had always used for her skincare routine. I was looking for something specific. Margaret has a small scar on her left forearm, about 4 centimeters long, from a cycling accident in 2009. She has a second, smaller mark just below her right collarbone from a surgery in her mid-30s. I had been thinking about these marks. I had not once, in the past several days, seen the woman's forearms. Late morning she was in the garden, doing some end-of-season cleanup in the backyard. I brought her out a coffee and sat on the step to talk. The sleeves of her sweater were pushed up to her elbows. I looked at her left forearm. The scar was there. I looked carefully. It was the right size, the right location, the slightly silvery quality of an old scar rather than a new one. I looked at it for long enough that she noticed me looking. "What?" she said. "Nothing," I said. "Just thinking." She accepted this. I went inside. I have spent 34 years learning that the most sophisticated frauds are not the ones built entirely on fabrication. They are the ones built on a foundation of truth. A real scar, a real coat, a real phone on a kitchen counter. You give the person checking just enough of what they expect to find, and most people stop checking. I am not most people. Over the next week I documented everything. I kept a written record, dates, times, observations, inconsistencies. I noted 3 things the woman in my house did not know that Margaret would have known. The name of our family doctor, whom Margaret had seen for 15 years, the street name of the neighborhood where we had lived briefly in 2003, and the particular coffee order I had every morning, which Margaret had made for me so many thousands of times that she had never once had to ask. Each time I found a subtle, natural way to reference these things in conversation, the woman either deflected, invented a plausible-sounding but incorrect answer, or looked at me with a blink of recalibration that lasted just a fraction of a second too long. She was good. She was genuinely good. But she had been briefed, not lived. My brother confirmed from the passenger manifest through a contact at the airline he'd worked with for decades that the flight to Vancouver had carried a Margaret Okafor on a return booking. She had flown out on the Tuesday and back 2 days later on a Thursday evening. When I picked up the woman from my house at the airport on Thursday, she had texted me from what I now understood was her secondary phone, asking if I could collect her, using the real airport arrival board to time it perfectly. I watched her walk toward me with luggage I recognized, and a smile I had seen 1,000 times, and I understood. I said nothing about what I knew for another 11 days. This was deliberate. A case built on observation and documentation is worth significantly more than one built on confrontation. I needed bank records, correspondence if I could find it, and one more thing. I needed to understand the full scope of the arrangement between the real Margaret and whoever was standing in for her. The 11 days gave me enough. I hired a private investigator, not a television private investigator, but a retired RCMP financial crimes analyst I had worked with professionally on 2 prior occasions. She found what I could not find myself, a numbered company registered in Manitoba, 2 years old, with the real Margaret listed as a director, alongside a man whose name I will not include here. The $62,000 from our joint account had flowed into a personal account, and from there into that numbered company. There was additional capital in that company that had not come from our joint account at all, which suggested the scheme had other dimensions I was only beginning to see. The woman in my house, it turned out, was a former actress. She had done regional theater in the 90s and some television work in the early 2000s. She and Margaret had apparently known each other through a mutual connection in the pharmaceutical industry. The physical resemblance was strong but not supernatural. She had the scar reproduced to professional quality cosmetic application. She had studied Margaret carefully enough to maintain the surface of a 22-year marriage for weeks at a time. What she could not replicate was the inside of that marriage. She did not know our family doctor. She did not know Cartier Street in Ottawa, where we had rented a small apartment the year our daughter was born, and we briefly considered relocating. And she did not know that I take my coffee with 1 sugar and a small pour of oat milk, which is an unusual enough preference that Margaret had commented on it the very first time she made it for me, in her apartment in 1995, when she'd had to send someone to the corner store for oat milk because she hadn't expected that. 22 years. 1 cup of coffee. The details accumulate. On the 12th day, I called my daughter in Vancouver. She was quiet for a long time when I finished. Then she said, "Dad, how long have you known?" "Long enough," I said. "How are you?" I thought about it. The honest answer was complicated. "I'm not falling apart," I said. Which is its own kind of answer, I suppose. I contacted a family lawyer that afternoon. By the time I sat down with Margaret, the real Margaret, who I had arranged to meet through a mutual acquaintance in a manner she could not easily refuse, the documentation was complete, the legal process was initiated, and there was very little left to negotiate. She had, through the numbered company, accumulated assets. The forensic trail showed clearly enough where those assets originated that her position was not a strong one. She was not the person I had believed her to be for the better part of 3 decades. I do not say that lightly. I say it as a factual statement, the way I might note a discrepancy in column 4 of a financial report. The numbers do not add up. The marriage was not what it appeared. Both things are true, and neither of them destroys me, which perhaps tells its own story about the state of what we had built together. The woman from the house left quietly. I have not tried to find out where she went. That chapter closed cleanly. My brother flew in for a weekend in November. We ate poutine at a diner near my house and watched a game, and he asked me once, directly, if I was okay. And I told him the truth, that I was surprised by how okay I was, and that the surprise itself was informative. "She underestimated you," he said. "She underestimated the job," I said. 34 years of finding what doesn't fit. That doesn't switch off, because the numbers happen to be your own. He laughed at that, finally. It broke something loose in the room. I am 63 years old. I wake up now in a house that is quieter than it was, and I make my own coffee the way I have always preferred it. And I sit at the kitchen table in the October light, and I think about what it means to really know another person versus what it means to know the version of them you have been permitted to see. There is a distinction in forensic accounting between an error and an irregularity. An error is unintentional, a number placed wrong, a category miscoded, a digit transposed. An irregularity is deliberate. It is designed to deceive. The work, in both cases, looks similar on the surface. The difference lies in intent. And intent, once you find it, changes everything about how you understand the document in front of you. A marriage is not so different. I have watched, over a long career, what financial deception does to people who discover it. Late the paralysis, the self-recrimination, the months spent asking how they missed it. And I will tell you what I always told my clients. You did not fail to look. You trusted, and that is not the same thing. The failure belonged entirely to the person who chose to build something false inside something real. That responsibility cannot be transferred, not to the one who was deceived. What I carry forward is this, that intimacy is not a substitute for attention, that we owe the people we love and ourselves the basic honesty of paying attention, not paranoia, not surveillance. Tension, the willingness to ask a question when something feels slightly off, even when the answer might cost you something. The kettle on the counter, the missing coat, the pause before an answer that should have come quickly. Those moments do not announce themselves. They offer themselves quietly, and then they pass. And the only question is whether you are paying enough attention to catch them. My coffee is getting cold. I should finish it before it does.